thanks for watching. I am making this video today to talk about this book that really changed my life, and I want to share it with you. So this book is called No Bad Parts by Dr. Richard Schwartz. I have my laptop here with my notes on it. This book is about Dr. Schwartz's theory called Internal Family Systems, or IFS. And IFS is basically the idea that we are all a series of parts or subminds that work within us to create different aspects of our personality and our experience. And Dr. Schwartz believes that these parts can get burdened by traumatic experiences in our past and keep us held in the past and holding on to negative beliefs and emotions. Through a process of unburdening these parts, we're able to bring these parts back into their essential role of harmoniously supporting ourself, and we're able to experience a much more whole, balanced, and fulfilling life. So if you're someone who feels controlled by your emotions, or if you act out behaviors or impulses that you don't understand or don't know how to control, this is definitely something that I recommend diving into. This book really did change my life, like I said, because it allowed me to fully integrate some parts of myself that were just strangers to me for decades. It helped me understand myself in a way that no other framework has been able to do so far. So today in this video, I want to first introduce the concept of IFS and the three main types of parts that Dr. Schwartz identifies. Then I want to talk about what it feels like to live being led by your parts and how you can move into a more self-led system. And I'll finish up by discussing some of the biggest benefits that this framework has brought to my life. So if this is something you're interested in, please keep watching, and I'm really excited to continue learning about IFS in the future. I will link some other resources related to IFS in the description because there's lots more to learn than I'll be able to talk about today, but let's get started. Alright, so what is the idea of internal family systems? Like I briefly said earlier, it is based on the concept that we are all a series of subparts or subminds within us. And Dr. Schwartz believes that this state is just a natural reflection of our being as humans, that we are just naturally multiplicitous beings. And so even though it is a natural reflection of our experience as humans to have these parts can get burdened by past traumatic experiences, and that is also something that commonly happens, especially in the modern day world we live in now. And when parts take on burdens from past trauma, they can get stuck in the past, literally at the age that you were when you experienced that traumatic event. So we all have a series of parts within us, and some of them are stuck at younger ages from being frozen in the experience of that trauma. So through the process of understanding the parts that make up you and showing compassion to all of those parts, you are able to experience a higher degree of inner harmony than you were previously. So before we talk about how you can go through the process of bringing these burdened parts back into communion with yourself, I want to identify the three main types of parts that Dr. Schwartz discusses. Main types of parts that Dr. Schwartz discusses are exiles, managers, and firefighters. I urge you while I'm going through these three types to see if you can identify any of these types within yourself, because my experience was that it was pretty easy. Once you view yourself in this framework, it's pretty easy to identify the different parts of yourself that work in these ways. First, we're going to discuss exiles. Exiles are the most sensitive, creative, innocent, and joyful parts of us, and they are also the parts of us that take on the heaviest burdens from the traumatic experiences we go through. So these are the parts of you that will get frozen in the past at certain ages when you experience traumatic events. These are the parts of you that will hold on to negative messaging that's learned through trauma and repeat that back to you. That could be, no one loves me, or I'm worthless, these things that we learn through the trauma we experience, and then we repeat back to ourselves. Dr. Schwartz calls these parts exiles for a reason. They're held away, they are bottled up, they're kept in the deepest recesses of our being. But even while exiled, these burdens can create enormous unconscious pressure on our everyday experience. These exiles can control who we hang out with, what we do for work, where we feel safe going, and it can really shape your experience of the world. When you're somebody who has a lot of exiles, you are likely to feel that the world is really dangerous and that there's a lot to be fearful of because you're existing in this state where you have so many triggers and you have so many feelings that you're afraid of experiencing. The second type of part that Dr. Schwartz identifies is managers. And managers are sort of the parentified inner children that are created as a reflection of these exiles. So, for example, if you go through a traumatic event of abandonment, you might develop an exile that takes on those really extreme feelings of abandonment and worthlessness and despair. You may also develop a manager part that's highly critical of your potential friends or potential mates or people in your life. You know, a part of you that's always looking for somebody's motive to abandon you and making sure you don't get too close to people because you fear abandonment. So managers can make us people pleasers. Managers can work to make us hypervigilant or paranoid. Other managers are often intellectual and keep us out of feeling things in our body. Managers are typically working all the time. Some of them literally don't sleep. So if you are somebody who is heavily controlled by the managers in your life, you're likely to feel really tired all of the time because you are spending an enormous amount of energy trying to control the outside world and to keep your exiles at bay. The third type of part identified by Dr. Schwartz is our firefighters. So in your typical experience, you have your exiles that you're working to keep at bay, your managers that are working to do so and to also control the outer world. Firefighters are the parts that respond when our managers fail. Our managers fail to keep our exiles at bay and our exiles get triggered. And we're experiencing these really negative emotions and overwhelming beliefs that are held by our exiles. Firefighters respond to take you out of those feelings. Firefighters can be parts that encourage you to abuse substances, parts that encourage you to self-harm, or parts that encourage you to heavily rely on certain types of meditation or certain spiritual practices that take you out of your body. Firefighters can use a whole host of methods to get you away from those feelings, but that is their goal, to get you away from those feelings as fast as they can and as effectively as they can do so. And there's sort of a relationship between your exiles and your firefighters. So depending on how many exiles you have, how extreme the negative beliefs that are held by those exiles, you might have, a different level of severity in the reaction of your firefighters. People who have really extreme exiles are more likely to have more extreme methods of control that their firefighters use. The amount of exiles you have and the severity of the negative beliefs held by those exiles can determine how hard your firefighters have to work to keep you away from those emotions and what they're willing to do to get you away from those emotions. So there's a relationship between exiles and firefighters. There's also a relationship between managers and firefighters because firefighters will often do things that take us out of where we're comfortable, especially take us out of where our managers are comfortable. So what can it be like to experience a life where you're being led by your parts? Dr. Schwartz talks about how our parts, especially when they're unregulated and unchecked, can blend with ourself, sort of taking over control of your life. Dr. Schwartz says that this quote from the book sort of describes what it can feel like. The qualities of yourself are obscured and seem to be replaced by those of the part. You might feel overwhelmed with fear, anger, or apathy. You might disassociate or become confused or have cravings. In other words, at least temporarily, you become the part that has blended with you. You are the fearful young girl or the pouting little boy you once were. So if this resonates with you, sort of being overtaken by an emotion or a certain belief system, it's really helpful to learn why this happens. So our exiles can blend with ourselves or take over when they get triggered. So if you experience, a small amount of rejection, it can feel like the wall of shame and the wall of negative self-talk that comes up as response to that. Or getting cut off while you're driving and, flying into rage. That can be an experience of your exile taking over. Our protective part, so the managers and the firefighters, take over or blend with ourselves when we've lost trust in ourselves to be able to control our existence. Dr. Schwartz talks about how a lot of people, most people, myself included, live a life where we're blended with some of our parts most of the time. And this can, create a life where you're just suffering from sort of a background sense of unease or a background sense of not being able to trust people without really being able to pinpoint where that feelings are coming from. So what can we expect from moving into a more self-led system? I super encourage you to purchase this book if you can, because Dr. Schwartz goes through a number of guided meditations and exercises for you to identify your parts and work with them and unburden those parts and move into a more self-led system. So Dr. Schwartz describes this process of unburdening. So unburdening begins with identifying the traumas that your parts experienced in the past. And our exiles can heal when our self is able to retrieve those exiles from the past and bring them in to the present with us and allow those exiles to feel our strength and capability that we now have as adults. So what you can expect from engaging in this process of unburdening is that you have a vast amount of energy that's available to you because it's not being used to keep your exiles from being triggered and keep your negative emotions at bay. So for me, it was like experiencing, having 6 more hours in a day or like an extra part of my brain because I was really able to free myself from having to focus so much on the past every day. So just by starting this process and by identifying some of your parts and learning to understand them, you are often able to get enough separation from those parts that you're able to have a different perspective. So it really helps you to identify these parts so that when you go through your daily life, when you get triggered, when an exile blends with yourself, you're experiencing negative self-talk or these negative messaging, it's a lot easier to identify that messaging is coming from a part and that you yourself don't identify with that, and that you can express understanding and compassion to the part of yourself that is repeating that negative messaging. So in addition to understanding and identifying the parts, having compassion for these parts is a really essential part of the process. And it's a lot easier to have compassion for these parts of yourself when you understand more. So Dr. Schwartz identifies that being self-led involves living in two truths equally. And those two truths are immanescence and transcendence. Immanescence being fully embracing our human experience, the emotions we feel, our physical experience in this body. Transcendence being the other side of the coin, which is recognizing that there's so much more to the world and there's so much more to our experience than we can understand while we're in this one body. So by experiencing a life that's more self-led, you're able to experience more self-love, more love for others. You're more able to find meaningful activities in your life and really live a deeper, more fulfilling life. Dr. Schwartz identifies what he calls the 8 C's of self-energy and self-leadership. These are qualities that Dr. Schwartz has observed in people who are living a more self-led life. So as you go through the process of unburdening and proving to your parts that they don't need to blend with yourself, that they can trust yourself to be in control, you will experience more of these C qualities and more often in your life. You will be more confident. You will be able to sustain clarity for longer periods of time. You will be able to hold curiosity in new things, to learn about things that interest you more easily. Because your brain has so much new energy to really serve yourself and support yourself harmoniously in a way that it wasn't able to do so before. You can also use these 8Cs as sort of a check-in with yourself to see how you're feeling and see how much of yourself you're experiencing in any current moment by considering how many of these traits you're experiencing. The biggest benefits in my life that I've learned from reading this book. The first one is pretty basic, but it is the concept of rewriting the mainstream mono-mind belief system. So the mono-mind belief system is defined by Dr. Schwartz as a widespread misconception that we are all one unified entity. As a person, you are a stable individual thing. The idea that we have one mind out of which our different thoughts and impulses emanate. This can obviously lead to a lot of problems for people because if you experience intrusive thoughts or negative self-talk, it can feel really hard to feel any separation from those experiences. It can feel like it's all coming from the same direct sphere of experience. If you're just one static entity, you don't have a mechanism for separating yourself from these negative thoughts that are happening internally. In rejecting that and in seeing ourselves as a series of complex parts, we don't have to dismantle the whole system when we exhibit a behavior that we don't like or that we have a negative thought that throws us off track. We can recognize that these thoughts and behaviors come from parts of us that don't define us in our entirety. And this idea of considering individuals as a more complex picture of their parts also can make it a lot easier for you to have compassion for other people, because instead of using the mono-mind belief system to label other people as narcissist or alcoholic or liar, you're more easily able to understand that these people have parts too, and they might have parts that engage in certain behaviors to protect them from certain emotions. And it doesn't mean that, what people do is okay or what you should forgive everyone, but it allows you to have more freedom in understanding the world around you and frees you from these individual labels that can keep our mind so trapped. The second thing that has really helped me is this concept of an inherent goodness model. I grew up Catholic, but there's this idea in lots of Christian religions and outside of religion entirely that people are essentially bad. And, in Catholicism and in other Christian religions, it's often explained to us is that, we are inherently bad, and only through the salvation of God, the grace of God, are we able to escape the depravity, which is ourselves. In Catholicism, the idea of original sin is akin to that. So this concept that we are inherently bad is damaging. It's bad for people to think that about themselves. Considering ourselves as inherently bad obviously causes some problems. When you view yourself as inherently bestial or inherently damaged, you're holding a sense of goodness away from yourself and letting something else decide when you can get to feel that way, whether it's, going to church or meditating or anything in your life. You're holding a sense of goodness that you deserve outside of yourself as a carrot, like you have to do something to earn it. And Dr. Schwartz encourages us to radically embrace the opposite of that idea. There's no empirical evidence that we're inherently bad. So accepting the opposite of that and embracing an inherent goodness model allows so much freedom. And embracing this idea of inherent goodness at a larger scale can really allow us to reorganize a lot of our structures, because we have so much of our society built on the idea that people are inherently bad and need to be controlled. And in any way that we can make more space for holding the idea that we are inherently beings of love and compassion and care for others, will create massive waves of change in the world. So the final thing that I've noticed is a huge change in my life is that I've been able to develop a lot more trust in myself through the process of unburdening my exiles and bringing those parts back into communion with myself. I've been able to show those parts of me that were stuck at younger ages the capable adult that I am now, and show those younger versions of me how I'm able to keep myself safe now and what I have control over now and what love and resources I have in my life. And being able to trust myself has allowed me to experience a lot more of those 8C qualities and a lot more often. Being someone who trusts myself has really changed everything for me. It's changed how I look at the world, it's changed what I expect of myself, it's changed what I believe I'm capable of, and it's really made me able to lead a much happier, more fulfilling life. Okay, thank you so much for watching if you made it this far. If anyone who watches this has any experiences with IFS or you learned anything from watching this video even, I would love to hear about it. This concept, like I said, really changed my life. This framework allowed me to view myself and understand myself in a way that I was never able to previously. And I just can't encourage anybody who is seeking more self-understanding or hoping to develop more trust in yourself or trying to develop more self-love. This is a great way to do that. So thank you for watching. See you soon.